When you first start playing fighting games, I think most people have the moment where you go from blissfully mashing and having a great time to being like, I would like to not do this anymore and I would like to become good at the fighting game. So you go and like look up videos or guides, and while doing this, you learn all these new things you're supposed to do and things you're not supposed to do. And then you're like, okay, let me go try to take these things to the wild. And when you do that, you realize that the other people out there are still feral creatures and they are out there swanging, mashing on plus frames, and they're just scratching their pits like, what's a plus frame? You're over here wielding your cane trying to be sophisticated. Like, man, I'm trying to play the game correctly. My opponent is doing all kinds of stuff that you're not supposed to do, and they're winning, and I hate it. And this happens as well. You hear people say things like, oh, I played against a really strong player and I did pretty well against them. Like, I didn't die that fast. Everything was fine. I got around. But when I play people who are worse, I can't beat them. So a couple of things. When you are going from being like the dude who's brand new and deciding to really learn how to play the game, you give up your mashing ways, making decisions that are lower risk, making decisions that are supposed to be correct. What ends up happening is often you take almost no risk and you don't know how to do that yet. My opponent's plus, I can never hit a button. If my opponent is doing a setup on me, they are OSing my backdash and stuffing this, and it's an instant overhead, left, right, cross up, everything. There's nothing I can do. So instead of trying to escape, you just sit there, even if the setup is not real at all. Instead of trying to attack in neutral, you only try to defend, doing all kinds of stuff that is low risk, low reward. You're not getting big damage in opening. And most importantly, maybe everything your opponent does pisses you off. You are probably dying to whatever your opponent chooses to do, because every interaction you have to sit there and think, what is the right thing to do here? While your opponent is just doing whatever feels good, whatever sounds good. And I think what happens to most players is they realize eventually the way you go from being this civilized noob to a civilized professional, in the middle there, everybody who's being feral, doing all this wild stuff, is onto something, because the best players are taking risks. And what you need to figure out is the right amount, the right line, how to also take risks, do things that are unorthodox and unusual, mash on weird things. And the players who are the best, who play a really kind of safe style, the style you're trying to emulate, the things that they do work because they know how to play around people who are taking risks all the time. So learn how to stop that kind of stuff. You have to experience it over and over and over. So you shouldn't get upset when you die to someone who's just doing weird, wild stuff, because the reality is you haven't learned how to stop it yet. And even if you know how to stop it, you probably don't have the muscle memory or the snap decision making to correctly stop whatever risky choice they're doing. You haven't learned how to play safely while also getting enough reward from your choices to punish that kind of behavior. The higher level player is taking less risks and in general is probably willing to lose rounds or lose interactions by taking safe, solid, consistent options. It gives you more space, more wiggle room. The person that's smoking you, that's not as good as this other person, is probably taking big, risky decisions aimed at beating weaker players or players who can't handle them. And they probably don't have as much of a flexible play style as the more experienced player, who, even if you beat them around, that's the one round you get. And then every other round, they now know how to beat all the stuff you're doing. And obviously in a longer set, they have the kind of style to beat you or the feral player that you're struggling against. And the other thing to understand is that most of the players you play doing all kinds of bad stuff, their play styles are not built to be consistent. And they know that. The way they play is to win one game one time or be funny. They're not trying to win every day, every game. They're like, okay, I'm gonna just do this one thing, and if it doesn't work, I'll take this one other risk, and if that doesn't work, I won't rematch this person. I'll go play someone else who my stuff does work against. You say, I feel like this conversation is valid for all sports and competitions. My best friend was a wrestler. When he started wrestling, he learned one move called the Peterson, and this roll works when you're on bottom, which is like the quote unquote losing position in wrestling. It was like a really high risk move, but it gained you a lot of points if you hit it. When we first started wrestling, I tried to learn how to wrestle quote unquote the right way. My freshman year of wrestling, I lost every match I wrestled. My best friend, who learned how to do this one stupid roll and nothing else, he didn't care about anything else. Every match, he would purposely get taken down and then do his big roll and then get his points and win. And he beat so many people this way. Essentially knowledge checking freshman level wrestlers with this roll. And he forced it and won over and over and over. The next year, our sophomore year, I spent like a whole summer and then the next year improving. And then I wrestled the varsity level, like the highest level. I did much better. I had much better results. I was winning matches and that, and I was doing great. My friend who just decided to only do the roll still beat anybody who didn't know how to stop the roll. But once he reached like the varsity level, what ended up happening is that people would take him down, realize that all he wanted to do was like this roll, and then they'd let him stand up. They would just not even give him that position anymore. Or they would just completely avoid the roll, and then they would just like pin him and win the match or whatever. Yeah, it's actually just like not doing Oki against someone in a fighting game, because you know like this dude's gonna wake up DP or do something weird. I'm gonna do like a safe jump into like a true block string, and if he doesn't DP, I'm out. So he had to learn some new stuff. He learned how to do the Peterson roll from like neutral. He learned how to do it from like all kinds of weird places. He started to adapt and try to learn new strats because people would catch on. Obviously, he struggled. He didn't have as good of a longevity to it because he sort of had a narrower approach to it. Whereas for me in the beginning, I tried to learn how to do like the correct stuff, and I got my ass beat for a long time until I finally got good enough to win doing the correct stuff. And I was a good wrestler because of it. I was really bad in the beginning though. You know that for me, losing for like a year straight, watching someone just do one move and win, it's very easy to think to yourself, I could just learn how to do this and I could win. But the reality is that long term, it's not valuable to you. Eventually, when that doesn't work anymore, you need like a foundation to fall back on. Does long term matter if the game dies in 3 months? Yeah, because learning how to be a better fighting game player applies to every fighting game. So if you only learn how to be gimmicky in every fighting game, you will never improve enough to be good when a game comes out that you want to play long term. And if you don't, you decide like, well, I would like to just play gimmicky in every game forever of all time. You can also do that. That's perfectly fine. But then you can't be mad about your own improvement. You got to know that the reason you're struggling is because you never learned how to play the game. You can't be like, how come I'm not winning more? You got to just know like, yeah, I'm in it to do funny stuff and that's all. It's not just like a fighting game thing or like sports or whatever. Anything you choose to learn, there's always like a short-term gimmicky path. I'm not saying that it's like a terrible idea all the time, because sometimes you can just learn how to be fundamentally sound after. But if you want to get better long-term, you do have to learn how to do all this stuff well. There's always something you can do that's like really low effort and just wins. And sometimes it's the right choice. If they had a bunch of streamers who've never played Street Fighter in their lives, then you should just be like, hey, you should mash Honda hands over and over. There's a tournament in 5 days. You can't learn how to be solid enough to beat this. That is like a great example of like, all right, sure. The Shiva Stomp, yeah, same thing. That's the best strategy you can do. If you're trying to play long term, it's different. That's the price of improvement is you got to do some other shit that works long term. Listen. Hold on, chat. I've got a visitor since the dogs are away. Hi, Theo. He's a little scared. He's down here. He's in a new space, so you know he's a little Theo. He's okay now. He's got chicken paste, and he's okay. You get chicken paste involved, all of a sudden, notice how nothing in life is scary. He is, as you can see, very, very pretty. He's also like really chill. He's only been in here like 2 or 3 times, and every time he was in like a carrier or it was like a short amount of time, so a little nervous, that's all.